Welcome back to the Domain Academy podcast, where we're seeing how much money people can make starting out with a $500 budget. And we've got an all-star cast. And this section of the podcast, we're going to be talking with Andrew and James, and we're going to be doing a deep dive into strategy. And then tune in for the next couple episodes as we join each of the other guests, and we'll deep dive into their strategies as well. And just a quick recap on the rules. Everyone starts out with $500. And what we're doing is we're trying to act as if we're new investors with a starting budget that's pretty reasonable for anybody to start out with. And the goal is within a year to see how many names we can sell and how much money we can make in profit from that. James and I have some added restrictions on what names we can buy, and you could check that out in the first episode of this podcast for more rules. But the general idea is $500. There's going to be some wins and losses along the way. Follow along and see what you can learn from us. Hopefully we can help you out to become better investors as you see this play out in real time. And with us today, we've got Andrew Allman and James Iles. And we're going to start off by asking, since we talked last, which was 4 weeks ago or so, what names did you pick up for the contest and how did you get those names? So I'm going to start with James first, then we'll go to Andrew.
All right, put me on the spot. So since we last talked, I have changed my strategy a little bit. So I started out really focusing on the keywords from Afternic. So for a little bit of background, that's the top keywords that Afternic puts out every month. There's a lot of consistency on those. There's my, there's group, there's bet, there's the. So that's what I was focusing on initially. But Andrew made a very good point in our last podcast that the reason that we're not seeing good names come down to the closeouts with those keywords in is probably because they're popular keywords. So I've changed my strategy a little bit. I picked up glitterbet.com, which was in the last stages of a $5 closeout, which I feel like is a good name for for the gambling industry. But you'll notice if you look at the spreadsheet that we've got, that my strategy is shifted quite dramatically towards geo names. So I'm looking at domain names where there is a specific need for people who want to improve their business presence online. So that could be real estate, that could be dentists. There's a few others, but those are my main focuses at the moment. And then I'm looking at population-wise, like cities in America with maybe 20, 30,000 population at least. So you'll notice that some of my names like VeniceBroker.com, MalibuAgent.com, LakeCharlesDentist.com, and SaratogaBroker.com. They're closeout names that I've managed to discover. So not a huge amount of progress from me in the last few weeks, but that's intentional, where I'm looking for a few diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, so it looks like you changed things up and you're planning on doing some outbounding. We'll get back to that, but because I find that interesting. But I want to find out what Andrew bought, and how did you discover those names?
Sure. So let me just pull up my list here. So I guess then looking at the most recent acquisitions since May 12th, so we're recording this June 4th, I've acquired InboxCentry.com, PressNavigator.com, WowCouture.com, RationalCode.com, and PodShuffle.com. All these were closeouts except for RationalCode.com, which was a hand registration. And, I'll say going through this process, I don't know if I would have the patience to be a new domain investor at this point with these restrictions, because I think the domains I'm buying are similar to what I would normally buy as a domain name investor. And these are the types of names that can take a while to sell, because there isn't necessarily a direct outbound buyer for it, like the ones that James is talking about. I think the strategy James is taking is probably a good one when it comes to if you're trying to flip these domains really quickly. I look at, of the domains I've sold this year, which, we're only at the beginning of June, I've sold 15, 60 names. Only one of them was registered in 2024. All the others were registered before that, right? So to win this contest, you really have to do outbound or sell investor to investor. And that can be tricky, and it does kind of change your mindset and what you register. I would say of the ones I registered here in the past couple of weeks, the rational code one, that's a hand registered. I found that through a site I can talk about later, lean domain search.
Okay.
But other than that, they were all ones that I found either through expireddomains.net based on the filters I've set, or through my account manager sends a closeout newsletter every weekday, or maybe it's every other day, that has kind of closeouts that might be interesting to look at. And so sometimes I'll find a name through that.
So you've been using expireddomains.net?
Yeah, that's primarily what I use to find names and closeouts. And I'd be happy to pull that up and kind of show how I do that. So
Yeah, I think that would be good.
all right. Let me share my screen here. Are you seeing expireddomains.net now? Okay. So yeah, I just have a set search here. So you see here, I've set searches for a lot of things, just GoDaddy expired, and then I save this one, GoDaddy closeouts. And by default, it sorts by valuation. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Which, this is the GoDaddy Go value. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like how it values domains. But when you're sorting a big list, it's actually, it's pretty helpful. That's not to say that a name that you find at, $1,800 is actually in your mind worth less than the one that's up here at, 3,000. Like, I actually don't think this is a great name at the top. But it does a pretty good job sorting. So I'll typically go through and I start here and I go down until it hits maybe, I don't know, let's see, you can see there are 28 pages that meet my things. I'll go down to maybe either $1,500 or when I think that the names are looking pretty bad.
Yeah.
And then I'll sort by some other measure, whether, you can do when the domain was originally registered, when it first popped up in archive.org. Sometimes I'll search by number of registrations, but if you do that, you should look at how those domains are actually being used. A lot of times it's actually the same person is letting the ComNet and org expire or something like that. So what I'll typically do is I'll come through here and I'll find some that I like. So, and then I'll star them. And then you see here that some of these are on their first day, some are second day, some are final day, the $5 thing. So I'll put them in a watch list. And then from the watch list, I will open, let's see, do I have any on here right now? Yeah, so these are ones that you actually see Wow Couture. So then I just come through here and I click to open these, and then I'll add them to my watch list. Or if I think the price is right, I grab it. So you can see here some that I actually didn't end up grabbing, like foodbulletin.com. Let me see. I think what happened there, someone grabbed it when it went from $11 to $5 right away, and I missed that one, but I think that one's pretty good.
This is actually a really good way to understand how popular your name choices are. Whether if you don't catch them, then it looks like that name that you didn't catch is already on CEDO make offer, so another domain investor's grabbed that.
Right.
And then the others that you've got on there, they look like, are they just registered, or have
someone got them somewhere? I mean, you see Wow Couture was actually one that I got, and it just says registered because maybe I guess they don't get Afternic lists as fast, right? That's been added to Afternic. But some of these others, I don't remember exactly when they got snapped up. I mean, it's possible they went all the way through the expiration cycle and went to the drops and then someone got them, but I'm not 100% sure. I just didn't keep good notes on that. Some others I haven't gotten that, someone else snapped up, like Legal Mastermind, upgradelogic.com. So, I don't get them all either. One of two things happens. One, someone grabs it before it gets to a price I really like. Two, I forget about it. I use the GoDaddy Investor app, but sometimes life gets in the way and you just don't get around to to getting it before it
Yeah.
goes through the cycle.
So the investor app that gives you notifications of when auctions are closing or when you've been outbid, for example, and that can help you to stay on top of some of these things, right?
That's right. So, really though, with the I think with the closeouts, you're not really going to get a notice when it changes days, if I'm right. So you kind of just have to open it each day, maybe multiple times a day, and then see, oh, look, this one's now $5 or $11. I'll buy it at this point. It just makes it really easy to purchase it too. Um, just a couple of clicks on the app, and it's already got, it's an easier checkout, through the app. So
Yeah.
I'll typically do that.
It's fascinating to look into some of these. What I'm noticing is that they're all 2 words. They all tend to be up to about 15 characters long. I think that over the years, it looks like you really refined the type of names that you're going for, and the ones that you've chosen for this competition seem to be in that same range that you're
Yeah.
established.
You really do. I mean, you do have to filter. I mean, look, you're going to miss some good names
Yeah.
with filters because filters are kind of crude. But yeah, I've got a length limit. I choose the English option, English word option in expireddomains.net. So I'm missing a lot of good brandables because of that, because a lot of times the brandables aren't, English words. But there's only so much time in a day, right? There's only so much effort you're willing to put into it. So
Yes, those are good tips. That really helps too, is sharing how you're setting up your filter. One of the things I like to do once I get stuff in my watch list is then I'll go look at the name. So maybe I think this is a good name, but I want to go look at it more right before I actually buy it, and then I can kind of use that as a staging area. So
yeah, there's kind of a double filter there, right? So sometimes it's like, I might be interested, so I'll add it to my watch list. And then there's a gut check too, and more research, like before you hit the buy button.
yeah, then I find out, whoa, this is really bad. What was I thinking putting this in there?
Yeah.
James, what are you using to be able to find the names that you found? You've been finding you changed your strategy, so I don't know if that changed where you look for names or or not. So
Yeah, so to be honest, it's mostly the same. Where I'm looking at expireddomains.net for most of these. One thing that I'm trying to look at is GoDaddy has, and lots of investors know about this, but I don't know how widely known it is for potentially newer customers. But they used to have an FTP site where you could download the inventory every day. A couple of years ago, GoDaddy Auctions put out a blog post talking about the fact that FTP was moving to a more updated version, shall we say. So on the web address is inventory.auctions.godaddy.com. So it's a very catchy name. But on there is the entire lists of the XML feeds of every single domain name in GoDaddy Auction. So what I'm trying to do is looking at a way of utilizing AI to use these lists, these publicly available lists, refine them down to some of the things that I need, for example, like geo names, and looking at those and then helping me to refine down, as well as using expireddomains.net, because I think that when you're looking at domains yourself, like Andrew said, you're always going to miss one or two. So maybe that's because you forgot to look at a certain time, or the consistency of it, is a very big factor. But I found with my day-to-day work that AI helps with tasks and helping you to stay on top of them a little bit more. So this is something that I'm not sure whether would work. I don't really have any good insights into that, but I'm interested to see how I can use AI with this publicly available feeds to kind of delve into the auctions in a little bit more detail. But as I say, these are publicly available. It's no secret. There's resources and blog posts and things out there that talk about these in depth. But it's an avenue that I don't think many newer investors would think about. But it's something that I want to explore, especially as AI is moving into pretty much everything now. So that's not something I'm doing, but something I'm exploring.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've been playing around with that myself. I haven't found the right way to like kind of crack the code on that. Um, I run into different things. I think I talked about before, like a token limit, right? So you can only put in a certain amount of domains. That makes it tough for it to, process. But I've tried a few different models, and I haven't, and a lot of different prompts, and I haven't found one that has been like just the easy set it and forget it. Like you still have to play around with it more. But I think the more we work on it, maybe if we come up with some good ideas and strategies, it would be good to share out. And I haven't found that yet, but I'm still playing around with it. But Andrew, I know you've been using a website that uses AI to be able to find some
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Do
And
you?
so, I think there are two things about AI here, right? So one is using it to apply some of your own rules and that sort of thing to filter through lists, as you guys have discussed. I've shared this idea with Mark Fulton. He used to write a domain blog, and so he whipped something up that he showed to me that was, taking basically downloading lists and then applying AI to it to identify names. But and it's good, but I think we're still, like you said, it's figuring out what are the right prompts and that sort of thing to find it. And then on the other hand, there are sites that are just basically search tools, right, that leverage AI. And so let me pull this up here. So this is something I actually ran into this guy at a conference a couple of years ago in Denver, and we were talking. And as with everyone, when you talk about what you do and you say you're in domain names, they get kind of excited and they start asking you questions and that sort of thing. So we started talking. This was right after kind of ChatGPT came out, where you could use it as a developer, and so he whipped this together. And I think this is pretty good. I'll show you a couple AI domain search tools. Let's see, what did I on my list? Uh, I got cloudchime.com through this, and I found dedicateddev.com through this
Hmm.
as well. And then there were a couple others that popped up as available that actually weren't, which kind of indicated to me that the ones I was finding through here that I liked were actually good. Like sleeksystems.com came up, and I was like, oh, that's a great name, and creativecircuit.com, but it turns out they were already registered. So what you do here is you can see here it's showing examples, but let's come up with something, guys.
Why don't we find a similar name to the ones that you've got? So you've got Dedicated Dev, you've got
Yeah,
Cloud Chime. These are hand-reg names that suggest the tech industry
right.
as a
So let's
whole.
say a tech company that develops custom software. Um, and then there are advanced options here. So let's limit it so that it's not too long. I'm going to choose .com only.
Okay.
You can add a keyword for extra
Mhm.
focus. We're going to purchase it from GoDaddy. But then you've got descriptive, clever alliteration, and metaphor. So let's just
Cool.
choose one of these so we can see what it looks like here. So as with all AI, it takes a second to pop up. You got to be a little patient here, but so you see here, there's not a lot of these are 3 words. But this was, what do we choose here? Descriptive.
Mhm.
And so custom code house, tailored coders, and then, it delivers 20 at a time, and you can deliver more, or you can generate more. So some of these are good. They're a little long. Obviously, tech domains are pretty popular.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit difficult. So now let's see the difference here if we choose clever.
So what's the definition of clever within?
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact definition. So let's see some examples. Like, okay, so digit drafters, right? So it's more, I think, more along the brandable side.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Preciseprogram.com, Softy Solution. Software, of course, isn't a term people use as much anymore. They use app, right? But digit drafters is kind of interesting. But you can see here the other types that it tried to come up with, but they were taken, like Clever
Yeah.
Code, CodeCraft. I mean, these are great names
Yeah.
here, right? They're just obviously taken.
Mhm. Pixel
She's
Perfect, Flipsoft. These are some good names.
Yeah, yeah. So it's generating, you can tell it's generating great domains. It's just most of them aren't available, right? When it comes to hand registrations, it's tricky.
Yeah.
Alliteration is one that I actually look for in expireddomains.net as well. This is where the words start with the same letter, or the same sound, right?
Yeah.
So nimble networkers. But let's look at some of them that are taken here. Code creators, code companions, bright bytes. those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
And
when we're just talking about alliteration, so what's the attraction of alliteration for you?
buyers like it. Let me look through some of my domain sales off screen here. Fortifyfund.com is one I've sold on an LTO that I actually found through AI Domain Genius back in 2023. So I have sold domains that I found through AI, and a couple, right? You're hand registering. These aren't, again, you've seen that the best domains are taken, but I have sold a couple that I've found through that. I think buyers like them because they're catchy, they're memorable, and of course, being easy to remember is important.
Yeah.
So I certainly think the alliteration is something to look for in names.
Yeah, I noticed you picked up a few with alliteration, so
Yeah,
spinsigns.com and
yeah. It's
Cloud
not the
Giant,
best domain I bought, but sellerserve.com.
Right, yeah, that's a better example.
Yeah, Cloud Chime. I don't know if that, I mean, they start with the same letter. I don't know if that's exactly the sounds are different, but so yeah, I think but I found it to be an effective thing to look for because I think brands like it, or buyers and user buyers. And in Metaphor, let's see what it pulls up for that. Coded Galaxy, Sync Oasis, but let's look at the ones that were taken, Fusion Cloud.
Yeah.
So it's coming up with metaphors for the words basically and doing them. So, and then of course, if you're like, oh, I don't know which ones I'll like the most, you can go to random mix. And I bet these will be different from the ones, let's see, Clever Crafters. So, it can take some time because as you see here, for every 20 it's pulling up, most of them are taken.
Yeah.
But you can find some good stuff in there. It can take some time, it can take some patience, but this is probably my favorite AI tool. There's another one that Domain Agents offers that's pretty good. You have to log in to do it, and they kind of rate limit you, so it's a little bit clunkier to use. But it says, okay, in your own words, what does your business do? So let's do, actually, let's just copy what we did here. Let's leave off words just because we didn't do it in the others. And then let's pick 3 terms we think of our company. So since this is a tech company, what do we want here? We want wise, intelligent, say positive as well, and generate here.
So for anyone not watching, there were multiple fields that you could input there rather than AI Domain Genius was just one prompt, essentially a bit like a Google search.
Yeah. So domain agents came back with names that are register. They say make offer, and then ones that you can register. So they have mindtechco.com, positive prog, PROG, so short for program. And then we can load more here. Let's see. I don't know what this one is. Power of
Ink.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then priceeco.com. So, so they're using AI. None of these things are perfect, but if nothing else, when you go through here, you might see some like, we're back on AI, domaingenius.com. You might look at codegenie.com and think, oh, Genie is a great thing to put with tech terms. And then you can, create a spreadsheet and use the concatenate function to come up with a bunch of keywords. This is James, you're doing geodomains through expired domains. I used to register a lot of geodomains, and I just had a spreadsheet with, 100 cities, and then I'd plug a term in, it would generate the domains for them. I'd go into GoDaddy bulk search and see what was available to hand register. Geodomains are funny. I think for this contest, they make a lot of sense. In general, though, one of your challenges is that your buyer market is so much smaller because they aren't global in nature. SaratogaBroker.com, one of your names, James, is only going to apply to brokers in Saratoga, which is a lot smaller than, a term that applies to everyone. But which I think for the contest we're doing makes a lot of sense. But I've just over the years, I had a lot of these names and I let them drop. I've also sold a lot, but they can be challenging because your buyer market's a lot smaller.
But also your buyer market is potentially more interested.
Absolutely.
As well. So You do have to probably make the connection. You do probably have to do some outbound on it. But if you're willing to put the work in, I think that especially those broker terms, it's essentially owning that market.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Just a quick tip for you, James. So broker versus agent in the US are two very different things.
yeah,
You can be an agent without being a broker, right? Like a broker is a higher level. And then I think we mentioned this on the last show, but for new domain investors out there, realtor.com, realtor is a trademark. So
yeah,
avoid those names like the plague.
Mhm.
So
yeah. It's very, very strongly
protected.
protected
Yeah.
for sure.
But it's something that most people don't realize is a trademark because
Yep.
it's almost generic at this
Yeah.
point. So.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very good point. But just going back to the AI tools for a minute, how are these starting to change your daily routine as a domain investor?
So I think, the tools I just showed aren't ones that I would use on a daily basis because they're really for capturing the hand registered domains. I think where things get interesting is the expired domain market. And can you find the diamonds in the rough that you aren't going to find through your crude filters, right? So a lot of people will set up a filter that's like the domain age has to be at least 10 years old.
Hmm.
But then there are a lot of great names that maybe expired and then they expired again. And you miss those that way. Or the number of registrations, right? So they're pretty crude filters that you apply because you can't possibly look through 100,000 names every day, but you miss some good things. And so I think that's where we're going to get. But as we've all discussed on today's show, just trying to do it manually through prompts and that sort of thing, it's kind of tricky to do at this point. And so I think some developers, I know Mark's been working on stuff, Mark Fulton that I mentioned earlier, I think will kind of make it easier. And I've talked to a couple, I know there are domain investors that are doing it, that have invested some time into the technology behind it. But I do think there are opportunities to find kind of the diamonds in the rough that you don't get with the crude filters that everyone uses, right? Because keep in mind, everyone, for the most part, looks at domain age and the number of registrations and keywords and that sort of thing.
100%. It's getting past the stage of it's almost like domain search 1.0 to 2.0, right? Where it's getting smarter and we can probably do more with the tools that we've now been provided by ChatGPT and Claude and these other AI services that are out there. We've got the technology now and we just have to work out how to implement it as domain investors.
It is I mean, just over the past 3 months, ChatGPT has finally figured out how to spell correctly when creating graphics, which was super annoying. But so I do it for you know, I don't know, a good half the graphics that I generate for Domain Name Wire now are from ChatGPT, or at least they start from there, and then I use other tools to develop them. And then spreadsheet analysis, it's gotten a lot better on. I remember trying a year ago to, you know, upload a spreadsheet and have it do something to it, and it would get through like 5 rows and then it would quit. Whereas this week I did something where I needed it to manipulate, split certain data out, and it did it for all of like 6,000 rows in the spreadsheet in a matter of minutes. So I think, this time next year, I'd be shocked if we weren't using generative AI in a very serious way to find expiring domains.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think the trick is to try and figure out one that's going to work for everybody, because everybody approaches domains different with their own background,
Hmm.
you know, or strategies. So, even in this contest, we're looking for different types of names. And when I released the Afternic Advanced Search tool, we did a test with, I think, 100 people, and I expected everybody to be looking for oneword.coms, right, that were underpriced. But everybody kind of approached it different and bought different types of names. And so I was really surprised, like, that there wasn't an overlap. I figured, okay, we're gonna let these 100 in, they're gonna find all the good names, and there's gonna be nothing left for anybody else. But everybody bought different types of names that were good. So I think that's kind of the trick, because there's an individual like component in domain investing that makes things interesting. So
Yeah, I found through that Afternic Advanced tool, just to plug it, I found margo.org
mhm,
for like under $100.
mhm,
So oneword.org, and sold that one for 6,500
mhm.
pretty quickly after. So there are opportunities in there for sure.
All right. So speaking of that, pricing, which is a great caveat. How are you pricing your names for the contest? So what would you do to price your names is what I want to know. And the contest we're trying to look at a year, who can make the most money in a year. So I'm sure that changes your pricing strategy. So maybe, maybe what would you normally do and how are you pricing your names, specifically for the contest? Are you using any tools? How are you come up with these numbers that you put there? And that's for you and James. We could start with you, Andrew, and then we'll ask James how he's doing his.
Sure. So I would say if anyone offers me for this contest at least $1 more than I paid, I'll take it. So I tried posting some to Name Pros like for $10 more, $20 more than I did, and I posted some on a list and published it to Twitter and that sort of thing. Haven't gotten any bites on any of the newly acquired ones that I acquired in this contest. I've sold a couple others that way, but as far as pricing for the contest, so it really depends on if I'm pushing it out to other domain investors, it's really cheap. It's like $50. For listing them on Afternic, I don't think I've posted any of them for more than $2,000, whereas normally long run I would for some of these. Like, for example, commoditylogic.com is a name that if it does find a buyer, it's going to be, commodities. It's going to be a company with a purse, right? And so it doesn't make sense necessarily to sell it that cheap. I normally price that at, $5,000 to $10,000. But for this year, I'm pricing all these lower between $1,000 and $2,000. I think for most of them, if I haven't, I mean to add lease to own on them as well for say 12 months. But that's kind of the strategy I'm taking. As far as how I figure out what those prices are, it's all gut. It's based on domains I've sold in the past, and what I think about it. So,
and you're so immersed in the world of domain investing anyway that you see the regular posts from Name Buyer, you see, the regular data that comes out, and it probably has some kind of influence at some level on how you're pricing these.
Yeah, I would say for new domain investors looking at what's selling, like just looking at, so Ron Jackson does an excellent job posting these lists on DN Journal sales, but you have to remember most of those are the top of the top, right? Either someone got lucky or was a great domain. So, other companies publish less expensive domains, and you can find a lot of those on Name Bio as well. And you don't want to look at what they're selling for in auctions. You want to look at any user purchases, but kind of looking at those names that are selling for $1,000 to $10,000, I think is where I kind of focus and say, okay, based on that, maybe this domain would sell for somewhere in that range.
Yeah, that's good to to know. The other thing I think on Ron's, what I find helpful is to scroll down, right? Because you've got this section of CCTLDs and other things, and then he's got a section of names I think up to $5,000. I forget what the cutoff is, but those are more like the kind of normal names that you'd see. So looking in there and seeing what's trending is another thing, because he publishes it pretty frequently, so that's helpful.
Yeah, he does that every other week. I do a post every week that's end user sales, where I look at ones that companies have purchased and I say who they are, and you see patterns there, right? You see, okay, this company had the .de and they wanted the .com, or they had a hyphen in their name and they wanted the non-hyphenated, or they wanted a shorter version. Maybe they bought XYZ company LLC.com and now they get XYZ company.com, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, those are great articles. I always like, those are one of my favorite ones that you publish. So I always look at those when they come out, because it gives you real market insight, like why are companies buying names, and your step to go like, okay, it was this company, and you could then either make the leap or you spell it out, like this is why they did it, and that's super helpful, and it gives you the price that people are willing to pay. James, what are you doing for your pricing strategies, and what are you using to figure out pricing?
Yeah, so I am using a sub 1,000 strategy at the moment. So if you look at my Afternic listings at the moment, they're all 999. I think that anything 999 or below has a good, decent enough sell-through rate that a lot of people are not thinking twice about purchasing those. In terms of helping me to value the names before I'm purchasing them, I'm using the Domain Academy valuation worksheet. And I'm also using Name Bio as well. So the Domain Academy worksheet does have a plugin to Name Bio, so you can pull some stats from there. But you can go a little bit deeper with Name Bio. With it's got multiple different searches and ways of searching for different domain names on there. So I use the two combined. I find that the valuation worksheet. I know that I work at GoDaddy, but I still use these on a regular basis because they help you to break down the different aspects of a domain name's valuation, which I think if you've been out of the domain buying space for a while, or if you're a new domain investor, breaking those down into different qualities of a domain name and then putting them next to domains that have already sold, they really help you to distinguish between any names that are good and any names that you've chosen that aren't so good. And the names that you've chosen that are good, you go on to purchase, and then you work out your strategy from there. At the bottom of the sheet, you have your estimated retail value, your maximum retail value, your wholesale value as well. And so I go into those, and based on the valuations from GoDaddy, based on the valuations from BrandPath, from Estibot, and then the Name Bio comparisons as well that you can pull through, you get a sense of where your boundaries are. And most of mine are sitting the retail range of between 300 and 2,000. So I'm putting them mostly around that 999 point. Like Andrew, if someone offers me a little bit more, then I'm going to take it for the purposes of this so that it helps to reinvest those funds a little bit quicker.
And James, I just pulled up a couple of your landers, the GoDaddy custom lander. It's not showing lease to own. Have you activated lease to own on these or?
Yeah. So what I've done is before I put any names into my account, so I've created a new Afternic account for this, is I went into the settings and went to the lander page. So that's afternic.com/account/lander. And I set up my default landers. So I'm going for custom lander and I'm going for the buy now plus make offer option for that. So everything that gets listed on there automatically goes into that setting. I do have lease to own enabled because you can also enable lease to own on that page by default for any domains that are priced between $495 and $100,000. I haven't chosen to put them on the lander because I want to either have an interaction or for them to purchase the name directly. But the good thing about lease to own with GoDaddy at least is that you can enable lease to own, not use it on your lander, but have it on the search path. So if someone searches for one of my names through GoDaddy, they either have the buy now option or they have the lease to own option. So what I'd say there is get the defaults set up before you really get started. It can definitely save you a little bit of work in the long run for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just typed MalibuAgent.com, which by the way is a great domain. Good pickup there. Into GoDaddy, and here's the lease to own option, $100 a month basically for 10 months. So
yeah, exactly. So it's going to be the lowest that you can do is $100. So if you have a $500 domain, it's going to default to the 5 months. You can always set it higher by default, but it's going to end up at $100 a month.
And you got that one in a $5 closeout too. Nice job.
I did.
Yeah.
That was again, it's a diamond in the rough. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great pickup. I was jealous. I think that's a good tip. The default, setting up your stuff to default as much as you can so that you don't have to worry about it. You can kind of just set and forget it. I know we're all probably guilty of buying names and then they don't wind up for sale for a while because we forget, right, that they came in the account. So having the default on GoDaddy too, you can set up default name servers, and it's not for auctions. I've been bugging the people there, so we'll see what happens. But the hand reg names that you do pick up, you can set the default. So I set those to default to Afternic, with my 3 name servers, NS1 and NS2.Afternic, and then my ownership verification one, so that it can overwrite, and then at least I know there's a lander there, so it'll go to a broker. I have it set up for make offer by default.
You still have to add it though to Afternic, right?
You still have to add it to Afternic.
Yeah.
So if you don't, at least the broker will reach out to you and say, hey, looks like this is in your account and we got an offer on it, but you don't have it for sale. What do you want to do? Like, at least you'll get that contact if you forget. So it's just another fail safe and helps. And again, that's only on hand reg. So if you get something on closeout, it's not gonna default to that. But I think the more stuff you could do to save time, the better. So James, I have another pricing question for you. You're saying that you're going to do outbound, right, to these brokers or agents. Is your pricing strategy going to change when you reach out to people versus what you have it listed for sale for, or are you going to keep the pricing the same?
I'm going to keep the pricing the same on the lander. There's always the option with Afternic where you have the custom checkout link, where if you're in a negotiation, then it's a useful tool where we can say, look, it's this price on the lander, but use this checkout link, go straight to GoDaddy, you can buy it for less. So to be honest, I'm going to play it by ear a little bit with the pricing for that, depending on the different negotiations that, fingers crossed, I'm going to have with these. You never know, but yeah. So that's it. I'm going to play it by ear.
Okay,
pretty much.
So you're open to negotiate, and if you do, you're going to use the custom checkout, which you can generate from inside your Afternic account. And one of the benefits of that is that there's a 5% commission on that, so it'll save you money on the commission side. One of the downfalls of it, which you need to be aware of, I think, is that it's only good for a week. So you got to make sure that you're ready to close that deal before you send that link out. Otherwise, if you send that out in your email open to people and then they take 2 weeks, it won't work when they click on it to come buy it. So you have to just be aware of that when you're negotiating. And
yeah, the intention of that tool is it's your ally once you've got to the stage where you're closing a deal.
Right.
It's not something where you can just send the link out in your initial email. It's way too risky for that. But
that's one risk that I've seen. So that's I want to bring that up because this is what you want to do. You want to be ready to close the deal and then send that out. And the other thing too is that I've seen people make a mistake where they have the same price and we don't know where it came from. So you want to make sure that if you have it for $9.99 and then you send them a link to checkout for $9.99, that they don't just go buy it from our front of site search or from your lander or whatever, because then you're going to get charged for the regular commission. So what we found works for people is if you're going to sell it for $9.99, go into Afternic and update your price to $12.99. And then send them the link for $9.99. So that way, if they go check it out, you still come out around the same that you were going to net. And if they use if they say, hey, you told me it was $9.99, say, yeah, it is. You just have to use this link. And that way you can do it. So I think that link does give you a little bit of extra wiggle room in your pricing strategy to be able to net stuff. So I wanted to go into that a little more because I think that's a really good thing to consider when you're doing
I used it last month to close a deal, and I gave the buyer an option because it wasn't obviously someone I found through GoDaddy. I was like, okay, here are the options to close it, and I was charging them the fees. So I said, here's the fee here, or we can do this. And one of the nice things is if the domain is opted in Afternic Fast Transfer, you don't have to do anything after they check out. It automatically transfers just like a normal fast transfer sale. So it was much easier to use than alternative services there.
Nice.
All right, I think we covered everything that we need to cover. I'll give you one last chance if there's any last words that you have, any words of wisdom before we close this out. James?
Yeah,
I've
go
exhausted
first,
my
James.
words of wisdom. Yeah, it's interesting. The first couple, so thinking about this from a new domain investor's perspective, for the first month, I've switched my strategy. And that's based on me trying to buy 1 or 2 names discovering that maybe the preferable names that I wanted were not necessarily available for me, switching my strategy to something else, and then trying to, working with that and developing that. So I think that as a new investor, don't be disheartened by the fact that the route that you're going down is not necessarily the one that is going to work out for you. Be prepared to pivot, be prepared to understand different aspects of the industry and different avenues that you can explore. I think that everyone in the industry has come from a different place. They each have their different strengths, each have different areas of knowledge, potentially leverage that if you're coming into the industry.
Yeah, I think we've all seen those people that come in, they spend their limit before they figure out a good strategy, right? And then they have junk. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm calling out Push on that. He did $500 on the first day.
Yeah.
Nothing since.
Well, let's see what he says when we bring him on the episode in a couple weeks. Hopefully he'll get a nice sale. He could just laugh.
Yeah. So advice, I guess this is just reminding me of the buy and hold strategy, the buy list hold kind of strategy that I normally do. How different that is if you're on a limited budget, right? And if you need to see results quickly, I just don't think, my sell-through rate in a given year is 1.5%, and that's on domains that I just acquired all the way back to 20 years ago, right? So when you're looking at just domains that I'm not going to be able to acquire 100 domains, right, with the budget we have, and these are going to be newly acquired domains. So it's tricky, right? And so I think there are two things there. One, if you're coming in with a limited budget, you need to understand you're going to have to put in more than just grunt work to figure out what the good domains are, but also grunt work to sell them. You're going to have to try selling them on either domain investor to domain investor or outbound. I think that's the only way you can really start to make quick flips. And there have been plenty of domain investors that have done that. They've hustled, right? They've worked hard and they've done that and it's worked for them. And then they got to a point where they could parlay that into, I'm going to do this buy and hold if they wanted. So I guess that's kind of my thoughts at this point here at the beginning of June.
Yeah. I'm interested to see like where everybody's at when we do the 3-month check-in. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Join us next week. It's going to be Deepak and myself talking about our strategies. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for watching.